Welcome back to HQ Spotlight on this mock draft Monday. That's right, we're counting down the days, 38 to be exact, until the 2025 NFL Draft from Lambeau Field. And after a pretty busy free agency thus far, we have some movement in our latest mock draft. We will be with you the next hour as we welcome in our own Mike Renner and Ryan Wilson to the show as we predict every single pick for the first round of the upcoming NFL Draft. Gentlemen, great to see you. This is certainly not your first rodeo, but for everyone watching at home, we're going to go through about 8 picks at a time here. So let's go ahead and begin with the number 1 overall pick. And at this point, it really feels like, Mike, it's either you're staying for the Titans or you're in taking Cam Ward or you're trading back. Which one is it?
Yeah, I could see a world in where the Titans want to move this for a haul, right? They're not a good roster. That's how you end up with the number 1 overall pick. And they've traded the number 1 overall pick before, right? They did it back in 2016. But I think they stand pat. I think they watched Will Levis last year, and they said, we can do better. It's not that Will Levis isn't doomed to be a backup his entire career. There are some positive aspects to his game. But you just got to take as many shots as possible when you don't have that guy. And it seems like it's been forever since the Titans have had that guy, all the way back to Steve McNair. So Cam Ward, to me, is the pick here, the Miami quarterback. He's my clear-cut number 1. He's the number 1 player on my draft board. So I'm going to follow my draft board here, and I'm going to go with Cam Ward to be the next quarterback of the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, hard to argue with that, Mike, for all the reasons you laid out there. And, Jordan, fun fact, you'll get to see Ryan Wilson and Mike Renner in person next Monday, and we'll be down Coral Gables at the Cam Ward Pro Day. So we'll get a chance to see Cam again. We talked to him at the Combine, and in person, he comes off as a young man with an edge to him, and that's what you want in your franchise quarterback. And as Mike noted, for all the physical tools that we see from Will Levis, it just never quite came together. He is not Brian Callahan's guy, and that Brian Callahan arrived in Tennessee after Will Levis did. So if they want to go in another direction, certainly someone like Cam Ward, and I imagine that the Tennessee Titans will be front and center next week at that pro day as well, would be a great and obvious choice.
All right, Ryan, I'm coming right back to you on this one. The 2nd overall pick, the Browns hold currently. You actually have them taking edge Abdul Carter. The combo of him and Myles Garrett is just scary to think about, but tell me why, in your opinion, this makes so much sense.
Right. The offense needs a ton of help, and it starts with quarterback, and maybe they consider Shedeur Sanders here. Is he the number 2 overall pick worthy? I don't think so, if we're being honest. If we're talking about last year's draft class, he would have been probably QB 5 or 6 12 months ago. And then, of course, after seeing Bo Nix play, he would have been behind Bo Nix as well. But in terms of Abdul Carter, you're getting a juiced-up edge rusher who's only played that position for 1 season. He was an off-ball linebacker, and much the same path that Micah Parsons took coming out of Penn State. And he is only going to get better. He is young, he is athletic, he is freakish. And when you watch him play, at times he can take your breath away. And then you pair him opposite Myles Garrett, which means no double teams for Abdul Carter. That makes things even more interesting. So we'll see. I don't think they're going to trade Myles Garrett. I would consider it in terms of trying to stock that roster with more players. But if you go into 2025 with Myles Garrett and Abdul Carter, you're in a pretty good place defensively, and then you have to worry about fixing the offense.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up, because I do want to get Mike in on this. Mike, as we just talked about, you have the Titans staying and taking Cam Ward. But if that's not the case, do you see the Browns potentially taking Ward if he's available at pick 2?
I do believe that if Ward's available at 2, he's a Brown. But if he's not, to me, everyone I've talked to, the gap between him and the next best quarterback is such that I don't think you pass on Abdul Carter, because as we've seen, if you have Abdul Carter and Myles Garrett for the next 5 seasons, which they have Myles Garrett on the contract for that, and now they'll have Abdul Carter on the contract for that if they draft him, that can still win you a championship. I mean, I go back to the 2015 Broncos that had DeMarcus Ware, Von Miller. That was kind of the last time we really saw 2 edges in that sort of caliber on the same franchise, and they won a Super Bowl. So to me, it's very possible to win on the backs of your defense when you got those 2 guys walking in that building.
All right, we'll see how that comes to play. Let's get to the Giants here now, who need a quarterback or quarterbacks, a veteran who can help them win right now, but also a quarterback of the future. Mike, what do you have the Giants doing at 3 here?
I'm doing exactly what you just described there, going both. I think they're going to sign someone and they're going to draft someone, and I have them going Shedeur Sanders. If you were there at the Shrine Bowl, which me and Ryan were, you saw that the Giants were all over this guy through that week of practices. He's just a guy who can be the face of a franchise, but I think he needs a year or 2 of seasoning. His issues with pocket presence are such that it would worry me starting him right away, especially high on the Giants line that's not been obviously ideal as of late. So I think he's the pick when it's all said and done, because this one's going to come down from the top. It's John Mara saying that I want someone to point to get my fan base excited. A 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers, a high 30-year-old Russell Wilson can get you excited for 1 year. It ain't going to be a long-term thing. It ain't going to move jerseys the way a Shedeur Sanders would.
All right, Ryan, let's go ahead and get to pick 4 here, because this is where things get a little crazy. We have some change, so walk us through it.
Yeah, this won't upset the internet, so I feel pretty good about the direction that we're going here, Jordan. We're going to have the old Dallas Cowboys trading up. Jerry is going to, in fact, get aggressive. They need help in a lot of places. They're going to get CeeDee Lamb some help. They're going to get Dak Prescott some help. They're going to get the defense some help because they're trading up to number 4 with the New England Patriots coming down, and they're going to take Travis Hunter. They have Deron Bland, they have Trevon Diggs at cornerback, but they've been banged up over the last few years, and you certainly need depth behind those 2 guys. They signed Kaiir Elam or traded for Kaiir Elam. He's not a long-term solution. Travis Hunter is. On offense, you have CeeDee Lamb, you have Jalen Tolbert, and that's about it. They traded for Jonathan Mingo. He never quite figured it out during his couple months in Dallas. Maybe that changes the former second-round pick for the Carolina Panthers. But Travis Hunter comes in day 1 and is an immediate deep threat and takes a ton of pressure off CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson and anyone else that might be out there running routes for Dak Prescott. So I'm making this trade up. Make the draft compensation, Jordan, whatever it is that makes you feel best about your team, and then understand that you have Travis Hunter for the next 5 years.
Jerry Jones, at the end of the day, still wants to move jerseys. He still wants to be the lead on every single sports program. Travis Hunter makes you the lead, with his unique ability to play both ways. And if he goes to the Dallas Cowboys, he 100% will. I think he focused on offense with them, though, obviously with CeeDee Lamb there and no one else at the wide receiver position, realistically. I think that's where his primary position would be. But if you got that guy playing both ways at the NFL level, we're going to be talking about him every single Monday next fall. And that's something that Jerry Jones obviously would be interested in.
All right, this one was juicy, and I'm really curious if it comes to fruition here. But you kind of sold me on that, Ryan Wilson. So we'll see if it happens. Mike, let's go ahead and get to Jacksonville here, who holds the 5th overall pick. Big need includes the interior defensive line. Do you see them addressing that in the draft?
100%, because there is a star player right there waiting for him in Michigan's Mason Graham. He is the 4th overall player on my draft board. To me, one of the most NFL-ready players in this entire draft class, which is odd to say because he's only a junior. You usually talk about guys like Jared Verse in that mold who are 5th-year starters coming into the league. No, he's young, but he looks like a veteran already. So for the Jacksonville Jaguars, you already saw GM James Gladstone say, we're not signing free agents because we have young guys that we're going to take in this draft that we want to get on the football field. Already basically tipping his hand saying we're going after the defensive line, which I don't blame him. This defensive line class is amazing, and Mason Graham right at the top there of my defensive tackle rankings.
All right, Ryan, let's get to the Raiders here at 6. What do you have them doing in the draft?
They have Geno Smith, or as I call him by his Christian name, Eugene Cyril Smith III, one of the best names in the NFL. And they're going to get him some help, Jordan. Tetairoa McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona. His pro day today, unofficial sub 4.5, 4.48 is one number that I saw. And if that's the range, you have to feel pretty good about that. Any concerns about his speed other than what you saw on tape, and he played pretty fast. He wasn't consistently stacking guys, but he's such a huge catch radius, contested catch, high point catcher of the football, checking all those boxes that you want in a deep threat, and Tet McMillan provides that and then some. You have Trey Turner on the roster, you have Jacoby Myers, and of course you have Brock Bowers. Now you get a legit deep threat who would be an improvement in my mind over what Geno Smith had in DK Metcalf, and now this offense is starting to cook a little bit.
No, I really like this pick because one of the bigger names in this receiving class. Mike, before you get to your pick for the Jets at 7, are you in agreement with Tetairoa McMillan here?
100%. A lot of people want him to go Ashton Jeanty here. I do not think that's the case. I would go wide receiver because outside of Brock Bowers last year, they didn't have a guy to go to, especially at the wide receiver position on the outside. And Tet McMillan, what he is a pure outside X type of wide receiver. Definitely fits the strengths of Geno Smith throughout his career.
Yeah, definitely will make an immediate impact with the Raiders. Let's go ahead and get to the Jets here. Mike, who do you have them taking at 7?
I have them going Missouri offensive tackle Armand Membou. I should specify, though, right tackle, because that's where the drastic need is along this Jets offensive line, obviously after losing Morgan Moses in free agency. They got all the other 4 positions kind of set. This is going to be their best offensive line since that 2010 season, or I guess it was 2009 when they went to the AFC Championship game. This is a unit that's on the precipice of being very, very good. You draft Armand Membou, the most athletic, the most freakish offensive lineman in this draft class, still only 20 years old, a guy who's over 330 pounds and still ran a 4.9 140 at the combine. You all of a sudden have the makings of something special there to block for Justin Fields. To me, it's a no-brainer if he's on the board.
All right, before we hit a quick break, let's go ahead and get to the Panthers here, Ryan, who are selecting at 8th overall in the first round. Who is next off the board?
Jordan, if Ted McMillan had still been here, that would have been an obvious choice for Bryce Young, but instead we're going to go on the other side of the ball. Their defense was decimated by trading guys and letting guys go in recent years, so they need to restock the defense. I went with edge rusher Mike Green out of Marshall. He is incredibly juiced up. No one plays harder play in and play out than Mike Green at the edge rush position. He does it 50, 60 snaps a game. The former UVA transfer went to the Senior Bowl and absolutely balled out. We'll see if there's some off-field stuff. He talked about it at the Combine and whether NFL teams are concerned about that or not. I've gotten varying opinions from teams about how concerned they should be, but we'll see. In terms of on-field talent, he's a top 15 guy, and if he went top 10, that also would not surprise me.
All right, gentlemen, we'll leave it there for now. We're just getting started here on our Mock Draft Monday. Here is a quick recap of our first 8 picks of our latest mock draft from our own Mike Renner and Ryan Wilson. Big change. And most notable, at 4, you see there, Ryan has the Cowboys actually trading up, taking that 4th pick from the Patriots to take Travis Hunter, the two-way star out of Colorado. Welcome back to HQ Spotlight on CBS Sports Network. Our Mock Draft Monday continues with Mike Renner and Ryan Wilson. I'm Jordan Giorgio. And guys, we pick it up with the 9th pick in the draft here. Mike, who do you have the Saints taken?
I have them traveling just down the road to LSU and taking Will Campbell, the offensive lineman. They have pretty much everything figured out, kind of like what I just said about the Jets. They have left tackle, they have center, they have right guard, they have right tackle, all figured out. They got that glaring hole at left guard. Will Campbell, after his combine, after measuring with a 6'5" wingspan, I think he's going to be a guard at the next level. But he's going to be a darn good one. And if you've seen anything this offseason, you know that guards are getting paid like $20+ million a year. It's a premium position in today's NFL. He is a day one starter. If you draft Will Campbell, you have one of the best run blocking lines in the NFL there in New Orleans. That's something that I am interested in. I think Mickey Loomis will be interested in it as well.
I like it, and they don't have to go far to get it. Ryan, let's go ahead and get to number 10 here. You have the Bears actually adding some defensive talent. Who are you liking in this spot?
Yeah, Jalon Walker out of Georgia, who can play just about anywhere, and he is incredibly athletic, plays with a ton of strength for his size, and I think his best football is ahead of him, as we like to say. Last year, they picked 9th overall, the Bears did, and there were some conversations about whether they might address offensive line or even edge rush to help out Montez Sweat. They went with Rome Odunze, who I think is going to be a really good player, the wide receiver, but this time around, they get Montez Sweat some help. A year ago, they traded back into day 3 and got Austin Booker, a developmental pass rusher. They signed Grady Jarrett for the interior during free agency, but someone like Jalon Walker opposite Montez Sweat feels a lot what we were talking about earlier in terms of doubling up on edge rushers to make it harder for offensive lines to double team one guy as opposed to the other. And that should be a lot of opportunities for Jalon Walker to get after the quarterback.
All right, working our way through our latest NFL mock draft. Let's go ahead and get to pick 11. Mike, the floor is yours as the 49ers are on the clock.
I have them taking a big swing of the bat here and drafting the biggest physical freak in the entire draft class, Shemar Stewart, defensive end, Texas A&M, to go across from Nick Bosa. You saw last year when Nick Bosa went down that their pass rush turned into zilch. Even when he was on the field, truthfully, it had nowhere near the teeth of that Super Bowl defensive line. Obviously had some big losses in free agency of guys walking on the interior. And while I'd love to address that interior, Shemar Stewart is a guy that kind of can play on the outside or the interior. He's a jumbo defensive lineman. And if you pair him with defensive line coach Chris Kosarick, who's been one of the best defensive line coaches in the NFL, you could untap that potential that everyone raves about there at Texas A&M.
All right, Ryan, pick 12 on deck after we had the Patriots actually trading back to 12. Who do you have Mike Vrabel and company taking here?
So, Jordan, they stockpile a bunch of picks by trading down, and then they take Kelvin Banks Jr., the left tackle out of Texas. And the last few years, I give the Patriots credit. They've drafted offensive linemen. They've all been interior offensive linemen. So this time, we're going to get a tackle. We're going to get a left tackle, Verdarian Lowe. Was penciled in to do that last season, and let's be honest, he struggled at times. He's currently listed as the starter at left tackle. They signed Morgan Moses as a right tackle in free agency. The veteran does offer some upside there in terms of making that unit a little more stable and capable. And I think in Kelvin Banks Jr., who's an incredible athlete, and still scratching the surface on what he can become. He may not be a day one starter, but he's going to be a guy that you can pair with Drake May, your second-year quarterback, for the next 7, 8, 9 years, and you should be able to feel pretty good about it.
To me, this is the dream scenario for the New England Patriots, trading back and still getting one of those top 3 tackles. This tackle class kind of reminds me of 22, when we had Ike Ekwonu, Evan Neal, Charles Cross, whereas like I had very similar grades on all 3. And if you could trade back and nab one of them, you were in good hands. And it ended up being the 3rd one drafted, Charles Cross, ended up being the best. So everyone wants the Patriots to draft one at 4. If they can go back to 12 and still get one of those top 3, I think that's the ideal scenario for them.
Yeah, and Banks Jr., a guy with 3 years of starting experience, someone who can step in immediately. Let's go ahead and get to 13. Miami Dolphins on the clock here. Who are you rolling with, Mike?
This is a little bit of a call on my part that they're going to go with Colston Loveland, the Michigan tight end. I know not a lot of people have a mock there, but tight end's a unique position where it's like if you really want one, I think you're going to like this guy's skill set. Colston Loveland, they don't come around every single year. A guy who has his size, his versatility, and his ability to work down the football field. You look at that graphic there. He was Michigan's passing game this past year. The only reason he didn't have more yards is because Michigan only had like 1,500 or so yards on the entire season through the air. You go back to the championship year back in 2023, he was the featured guy in this passing game. His ability to get downfield for a tight end is as good as I've seen outside of Brock Bowers, who was kind of his own animal. But he is almost at that caliber of a tight end prospect. And for Mike McDaniel, he knows what he had when he was with the San Francisco 49ers and George Kittle and what that opened up for the rest of that offense. He's never had it in Miami. Now he could have it if he drafts a Colston Loveland.
Yeah, Tua gets a reliable pass catcher in the process as well. Let's go ahead and get to 14 here where the Colts are up, Ryan.
Yeah, Colston Loveland would have made a lot of sense here. Even Tyler Warren, the other tight end who's going to be a first-round pick out of Penn State, would make some sense here. But I went on the other side of the ball. And admittedly, the Colts have done a lot in free agency to bolster their secondary. But Jahdae Baron, for me, is just too good to pass up. The nickelback/corner out of Texas. Juju Brents has battled injuries at outside, and Jahdae Baron could step in there if you need him there. To have Jalen Jones, who played well early in his career in Indianapolis. They signed Charvarius Ward, who obviously gives you some depth there, and they have Kenny Moore. But I think you could never have enough defensive backs to rotate in and out of there, and the ball skills with which Jahdae Baron plays makes him a first-round talent, and I don't think that the Colts would be hard-pressed to take him here, even though they could perhaps target a tight end and certainly help out Anthony Richardson and or Daniel Jones, which is a funny thing to say out loud. But I want to Jahdae Baron. Loved him at the Combine, and he had a fantastic season for Texas in 2024.
I am shocked that you passed on Tyler Warren there, but you did make your case. Let's go ahead and get to 15, Mike. Falcons pick up a big name out of Georgia. Why does Mykel Williams work here?
Because he's versatile and because his ceiling is very high in this draft class. He's got extremely long arms. He can play, that 3-4 defensive end where he did a lot at Georgia, where he's lined up over the tackle or just on the outside of guards. Or he can line up over, outside edge of tackles in a 2-point stance with his hands up and really rush the passer at a high level. Kelvin Banks, who we just talked about him, he beat him for a strip sack in that game against Texas last season during the regular season when he played. So Mykel Williams, I think it was played a little bit out of position, a lot on the interior, but even there, he was still a high-end run defender. So for the Atlanta Falcons that really need both inside and outside on their defensive line, he's a guy that can kind of bridge that gap and give you a little bit of both.
All right, let's go ahead and get to the Cardinals next on the clock here at 16. Who do you have for us, Ryan?
Yeah, you pointed out, Jordan, we do these every Monday, and a lot of times Kenneth Grant seems to be the popular choice, the defensive tackle out of Michigan, coming to the Cardinals here with this pick. This time I went on the other side of the ball. I went with Tyler Booker, the guard out of Alabama, who's one of the best offensive linemen in this draft class. He could even go a little bit higher than here. I love the idea of having him bolster that interior, of giving Kyler Murray another big guy to protect him. They drafted Paris Johnson Jr. a few years ago at Ohio State, played right tackle, moved to left tackle. You just keep building from the inside out, and I think Tyler Booker, as I mentioned, could continue to sort of rise up draft boards as we get through this process. Had a fantastic season for Alabama, interviewed off the charts at the Combine, and you watch him play, and you're like, okay, I get it. This guy's truly special, even for someone who weighs 320-something pounds.
Yeah, I think Cardinals fans should be pumped up about this pick. Mike, I actually know you are high on Booker as well. Would you say he's one of the most polished offensive lineman prospects in this year's draft?
Yeah, if I had to pick one guy to be the best as a rookie, it's probably him. He's just been starting since day one at Alabama. And especially for the Cardinals, when you have a 5'10" quarterback, you need those pockets to be big for him to see through. You know, you can't have guys coming into his lap on the interior. And Tyler Booker, his anchor, his ability to keep those firm pockets as good as it is in this entire draft class.
All right, gentlemen, we will leave it there. Much more to come as we continue to roll through Mock Draft Monday here on HQ Spotlight. After we had the Patriots trading back to 12, you take a look at who we have them taking there. Kelvin Banks started 3 years at Texas, will make an immediate impact when if he gets to New England. Welcome back to HQ Spotlight on CBS Sports Network. Our Mock Draft Monday continues with Mike Renner and Ryan Wilson. I'm Jordan Giorgio. We have now entered the second part of the first round of the draft, and we pick it up, guys, pick 17 here in the first round. Mike, who do you have the Bengals taking?
I have them going Penn State tight end Tyler Warren. Now, hear me out, because I know they just re-signed Mike Gesicki, but I'm going to make my case, and I'm going to probably say this 100 times from now until the draft, but I don't think it's a coincidence that the two most successful quarterbacks of the past 2 decades also played with the 2 best tight ends of the past 2 decades in Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce. And I see Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland as capable of reaching that caliber of tight ends. And what it is they are so difficult to defend. You cannot game plan to take away guys over the middle of the football field who sit in zones, who are on the same page with their quarterbacks, because those throws are so easy to make, because when you're on the same page, you can always make the defense wrong. A guy like Tyler Warren, who was a high school quarterback, who went to Penn State thinking he might play quarterback there, it shows on tape, and there's a reason why he was the #1 option in that offense. You pair that with Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, no one is stopping that offense. That's something I'm very interested in.
Game over. I was waiting for that name to be off the list. I love it. Love Tyler Warren. Immediately adds value as a blocker, of course, in the run game, but of course as a receiver as well. Let's go ahead and get to 18 now. Seahawks on deck here, Ryan. What makes sense here for Seattle after making a big splash and going to get Cooper Kupp?
They would love Tyler Booker, but he's already gone, Jordan. So instead, they're going to help out Sam Darnold with a skill position player. I'm with Matthew Golden, the wide receiver out of Texas, coming into the fall. All the focus was on Isaiah Bond, his teammate, the Alabama transfer, and all Matthew Golden did was outplay him and make himself into one of the best wide receivers in college football, and almost certainly is going to find his way inside the first round. And you might say, wait a second, they just signed Cooper Kupp, they just signed Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I would point out that Cooper Kupp's north of 30, and while he can still be productive, he won't be the go-to guy. You do have JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's going to get a lot of the lion's share of these looks here. But MVS had 19 receptions last year and 24 the year before that. There's certainly room in this offense for someone like Matthew Golden, who played 80% of his snaps outside in Texas, so he can play outside or in, and he also adds some value in the return game. So let's electrify this offense in a post-Geno Smith world now that Sam Darnold is we're going to see just how good Sam Darnold is without Kevin O'Connell and that offensive line of those playmakers in Minnesota.
Well, I hope we do. Sam Darnold would be a happy man if all this comes to fruition. Let's go ahead and work our way down to 19. And Mike, Buccaneers on the clock. Where are you leaning here?
I'm going to go Michigan cornerback Will Johnson. This is just taking advantage of the fact that one of the premium players in this draft class fell to this point. And if you're the Bucs and you're looking at this roster, there's not a lot of needs. There's not like a position to point to that you're like, I have to have that position. And I think adding depth to the secondary that was so banged up a year ago is something that could take them to the next level. If you're trying to get through this NFC, and they have hopes for more than just winning the South, they have Super Bowl aspirations. Will Johnson and Jamel Dean are 2 guys that can lock down on the outside. That makes everyone else's job a lot easier in that secondary. So on the Bucs and he falls to me, this one's a pretty easy pick.
All right, easy pick. Let's get to 20 here, Ryan. And finally, the big name, one of the only big names really left off the board, Ashton Jeanty heading to Denver. Why does he fall so far, and why does this make sense?
All the tight ends are gone, and they would have been obvious choices here, even though the Broncos just got they got Evan Ingram, so that's going to help Bo Nix to some degree. Javonte Williams has moved on. He's now in Dallas. And sometimes these running backs get pushed down. When you the only two quarterbacks off the board. But in terms of the offensive line, Jordan, in terms of the edge rush we talked about, in terms of the cornerbacks, just saw one go a moment ago when Mike took Will Johnson. So here's Jaxson Jeanty, who to me is in the same conversation as Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. And he's fallen in the lap of Bo Nix and Sean Payton, and it feels like a match made in heaven. I know they have Jalon McLaughlin and they have Audric Estime, shout out Mike Renner, Notre Dame. But I think Ashton Jeanty here at 20, my goodness, this offense goes from being pretty good last year to being explosive now. Some of the players they have in the skill position. And Ashton Jeanty, while he didn't catch a lot of passes last year, Jordan, if you go back and watch 2023, he's as valuable in the pass game as he is as a running back. So that's just one more weapon for Sean Payton to have at his disposal as Bo Nix heads into year 2.
While not everyone in the NFL would take a running back in the first round, Sean Payton's done it twice. He did with Reggie Bush. He did with Mark Ingram. Now, obviously, those were well over a decade ago with both. But I do think that the running game is the focal point of his offense, and especially with how it operated last year with Bo Nix, they desperately needed some dynamism at that position, and they don't have that coming back. They didn't have that last year. They desperately need it. Ashton Jeanty could take that offense into the stratosphere. Yeah, they need wideouts, but you can wait on that to the second round to find a guy. You can't find the dynamism of Jeanty anywhere else, maybe even in any other draft class, truthfully.
I'm liking it, gentlemen. All right, well, coming right back to you, Ryan. We're switching up the order here now because the Steelers, your Steelers, are on the clock. Let's go ahead and welcome Ryan Wilson to the podium for the pick. Floor is yours.
I'm shaking my head, Jordan, because the Steelers are in a bad way. They don't have a quarterback. They're battling over 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers. They might have to beg Russ Wilson to come back. So we're not going to focus on the negative. We're going to focus on the positive. We're going to go to the other side of the ball. We're taking Nick Emmanwori, the safety slash joker slash do everything out of South Carolina. He tested through the roof of the combine. He plays exactly like he tested for South Carolina. He would add some much needed an edge to that secondary to go along with Minkah Fitzpatrick. They drafted Joey Porter Jr. in the second round a few years ago. And they do need someone in the middle of that defense to be something of an enforcer and someone with ball skills. And Nick Emmanwori brings both of those things to the table. Incredibly smart young man and plays, as I like to say, with his hair on fire. And at 225-ish, he's going to bring the thunder coming downhill and run support. And he can find his way to the football with the interceptions we saw last year at South Carolina. That translates to the next level. So I'm taking him here. And then fingers crossed, hoping to plan, Jordan. But I hope the Steelers can figure it out at the quarterback position.
Well, I think we're all hoping nothing but the best for you at this point. So we'll see if that puts a big smile on Steelers fans' face. Let's go ahead, Mike, and get to 22 here. The Chargers are rolling with who?
They're going to go with Derrick Harmon, the Oregon defensive tackle. You look at this Chargers depth chart on the interior of that defensive line, it is a barren wasteland. They got nobody walking through that door right now, and that's not the Jim Harbaugh way. He wants to win in the trenches first. Obviously, offensive line's where they went last year. I think they go defensive line this year. Harmon is a Jim Harbaugh defensive line, 34-inch arms. He can two-gap. He can play the run first, the way that Chargers and that defense loves to do it. And then he can also get after the passer as well. So it could be a cornerstone piece of that defensive front.
All right, back to you, Mike, here for 23, your Green Bay Packers. Who's the newest cheesehead?
I'm going to go Ole Miss defensive tackle, Walter Nolan, a guy who's one of the most athletic defensive tackles in this draft class. He can get up the football field. He is a pure three technique for a defense that's badly in need of one at this point. And the Packer way of late has just been throw all your picks at this defensive line. And I think they're going to keep doing it. And with Nolan, he's the 12th ranked player on my draft board. I see high-end potential from him. He was awesome in the run game this past year. Good as a pass rusher, but still a lot of meat on the bone from developmentally. If he takes the next step in the NFL, he could join that tier of elite guys at that position. And for the Green Bay Packers, they've been looking for that ever since Kenny Clark started to go downhill a little bit.
All right, lastly here, Ryan, before we hit a break at 24, who's the newest member of the Minnesota Vikings?
Malaki Starks out of Georgia, the safety there. One of the smartest guys in this draft class. One of the best athletes on a Georgia defense filled with best athletes. And he can play free safety. He can play in the slot. He can come down into the box. He only, quotation marks, ran a 4.5 at the combine. He plays so much faster than that. And as I mentioned, he's incredibly smart. So he could be a guy that you can pencil in there day one, give Harrison Smith some breaks. And I love the idea of Brian Flores, defensive coordinator, using him in those exotic blitz schemes he likes to dial up, and him having every ability to understand it from day one and implement it as soon as he hits the practice field and the game field. So Malaki Starks, should he be here, feels like a steal almost because he could certainly go 5, 6, 7 picks higher than this.
All right, we'll leave it there, gentlemen. We have a few more picks to work through as our Mock Draft Monday continues, but a recap of picks 17 through 24 here. A few big names off the board in this area. Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State, will add an immediate impact to the Bengals. And then Ashton Jeanty fell a little bit. The running back out of Boise State will be heading to Denver. Welcome back to HQ Spotlight here on CBS Sports Network. We are in the home stretch here, gentlemen, where we're picking up our Mock Draft Monday with pick 25. Mike, who do you have the Texans selecting?
I have the going Ohio State offensive lineman Josh Simmons. I think everyone and their mother knows that they're going to be drafting an offensive lineman very highly in this class. After trading away Laramie Tunsil, after trading away Kenyon Green, it's kind of a barren wasteland there along that offensive line. Josh Simmons, though, is a guy that played tackle at Ohio State. I could very well see him playing guard at the next level. Very smooth, very good pass protector. The only question is talar tendon tear midway through the season against Oregon. Will he be healthy from day one? If he is, you're getting a day one starter. That's something that the Texans, well, they desperately need given the state of that offensive line.
Ryan, let's go ahead and get to 26 here, where the Rams are on the clock. As we know, they're bringing back Matthew Stafford to be their QB1, but you actually have them picking up a quarterback as well. Who and why?
Yeah, it's Jaxson Dart time, Jordan. And here's the thinking. Is Jaxson Dart a first-round pick? I don't have him graded as a first-round pick, but we know sometimes these quarterbacks get pushed into the first round either because of need or because of fifth-year option or because of both. Now, you talked about Matthew Stafford coming back. How long is he going to be in L.A. is the question. And if the Rams like what they see in Jaxson Dart, they could very easily take him here at the bottom of the first round. And I keep coming back to this talking point from a year ago. Fit matters. Ask Washington and Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels. Ask Denver and Bo Nix and Sean Payton if fit matters, because those quarterbacks landed in the exact perfect spot for them, and the play callers that helped them have the most success were on those staffs. And I think that we can all agree that Sean McVay is pretty good at his job in putting his players in position to have success. And Jaxson Dart does not have to play right away. And if you put him in a situation where there are players around him and a really good defense, he can sort of lean on his teammates as he learns the ropes and then go from there in a year or two when Matthew Stafford decides to retire. So a little bit of a stretch pick here, but you're thinking long-term with the understanding that Sean McVay can get the most out of these young quarterbacks, and that's why I took Jaxson Dart.
Yeah, here's the thing. With Sean McVay, you're never going to be drafting top 5. You know, he's too good of a head coach. That's too well run of a franchise. Even if Matt Stafford gets hurt this year, with Jimmy G coming in, they will win, 8 to 9 games. So you're never going to get your quarterback of the future unless you take one in the end of the first or in the middle rounds. And I think uniquely in this draft, there's a lot of guys who fit that bill that could end up being franchise quarterbacks, but for one reason or another, there's some aspect of their game that's a glaring weakness that's going to make them fall down draft boards. If you're the Rams, I would take advantage of that in this draft class to get at least a developmental guy, because Matt Stafford, given his injury history, he ain't going to last forever there.
Yeah. Makes all the sense in the world. Let's go ahead, Mike, and get to 27 here. The Ravens are on deck. What makes the most sense?
I'm going to go linebacker Jihad Campbell. I think for the Baltimore Ravens, it's not necessarily a glaring need. Outside of Roquan Smith, they have Trenton Simpson there, who is a fairly high draft pick, third rounder. But what do the Ravens do? They just take value where they can find it. So if you get a guy like Jihad Campbell, who's kind of like when Tyler Linderbaum fell, he was a center, but everyone kind of knew, yeah, that guy's going to be an awesome player. And lo and behold, he turned out to be an awesome player in the NFL. I feel similarly about Jihad Campbell. He's a well-rounded linebacker. The guy can blitz. He can be a part of those blitz packages that are so creative there in Baltimore. And at the end of the day, you just take a darn good football player to add to that defensive front. It's a very Baltimore Ravens-y move.
Yeah, most definitely. I was going to say history a little bit repeating itself. Ryan, let's go ahead and get to 28 here. The Detroit Lions, time to shine. Who is headed to Motor City?
So a quick story here, Jordan. There's a photograph of our buddy Rick Spielman trying out for the Detroit Lions with his brother Chris Spielman. And I mention that because both of them are sitting down on the bench and they have these terrible 70s mustaches. Gray Zabel has a terrible 70s mustache. He feels like a Detroit Lion, but he plays like a grown man. Now, he played left tackle last season for North Dakota State with that mustache, went to the Senior Bowl, and was absolutely dominant at guard and center. He'll play inside in Detroit, and I love the idea of him alongside Taylor Decker and Panay Sewell and helping out Jared Goff in a post-Ben Johnson world. He could be a day-one starter. That's the type of player he is, and he's going to be a day-one leader when you talk to teams about the sort of person he is. And, again, he'll bring the mustache with him, and he'll fit right in.
He's got the look. He'll fit right in. No issues there. I love it. Mike, 29, the Washington Commanders with plenty of additions this offseason so far through free agency. Fans hoping they roll with this momentum. Who do you have them selecting, and who's headed to the nation's capital?
I'm going to be curious to hear your thoughts on this, Jordan, because I have them going Donovan Ezeraku, BC defensive end, a guy who's highly athletic. He had the top 3 cone time of anyone at the combine, a little bit undersized, but perfect for Dan Quinn and those third down packages that he loves to create so much chaos with. He can get home on stunts, and he has one of the best bags in this entire class in terms of pass rushing. Like, he has a number of moves at his disposal, and I think if he fills out his frame just a little bit more, this guy could be a serious player at the next level. And they were using Frankie Louvu in third downs as like an edge rusher. This could at least be an upgrade from that.
I don't hate it, but my mind goes to all the other bigger names in the receiver class in particular. So I'm going to pick your brain because we have a few more picks to get to, but I do want to pick both of your brains on some of the names that still remain in this receiving class. Ryan, nearing the end of the first round, we find ourselves with the Bills at 30. You have them picking up a corner. Tell us why.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier they moved up from Kyrie Elam, their former first-round pick. He just never quite worked out. He was outplayed by Christian Benford during their rookie seasons. Christian Benford's still there, penciled in to be the starter. And Dane Jackson's penciled in to be the other starter. So I went with Trey Amos, the cornerback out of Ole Miss. And Mike and I have talked about him a little bit, but I think he needs to be talked up a lot more. He is truly a special, big, fast, strong cornerback who plays outside in the best conference in football. And Mike and I asked Jaxson Dart about this at the Combine, and he said the best corner he faced in the SEC was Trey Amos. He saw him every day at practice and obviously faced up against some of the other great players on Saturday. But I think Trey Amos is a guy that we're not talking a lot about. But once you see him play next fall, you'll wonder why we weren't talking more about him. And I think in Buffalo, he's going to bring that physicality and that playmaking ability on the outside to replace what Kyrie Elam never really brought when he arrived in Buffalo from Florida a few years ago.
We'll look forward to that. Let's go ahead, Mike, and get to 31, where the Chiefs are on the clock. You have them taking a defensive lineman. Tell us about Kenneth Grant.
Yeah, they lost Tershawn Wharton this free agency season. They signed Jerry Tillery, which is like a cry for help for your defensive tackle position. Kenneth Grant is a massive nose tackle, 330 pounds, but he can go sideline to sideline. He's got great range in the running game and one of the best athletes in this entire draft class. Explosive, and you get him in a building where he gets to learn from Chris Jones, the best pass rushing defensive tackle in the NFL right now, who has a very similar body type with his size and with his length. That could bode very well for his career, and just the Chiefs need to figure out sort of a transition plan for Chris Jones because he's on the wrong side of 30. And yeah, he's signed for a few more years, but he's not going to be this elite player forever into his mid-30s. So getting another guy to pair beside him is something that could really, sort of turn around this defensive front next season.
All right, let's go ahead and round out the first round with pick 32. The Super Bowl champs and the Philadelphia Eagles select Ryan.
So they lost Mekhi Becton. He ended up with the Chargers. And Tyler Steen could very easily be penciled in at right guard. Or you could draft Donovan Jackson, the left guard / left tackle at Ohio State. He had to play left tackle for much of the season when Josh Simmons went down. And unfortunately for Donovan, his first matchup was against Abdul Carter and Penn State. Admittedly, he said that was rough. After that, he put it together, and he was incredibly impressive playing out of position at the toughest position on the football field. His future is inside. He's the smartest kid you'll ever talk to. He loves football, and he's locked in. And he's also really good at what he does. So you could pencil him back in at the guard position. You could move Landon Dickerson around if you wanted to, if you wanted him to play center. There'd be a lot of choices there, but he feels like a guy who's probably going to go top 40-ish. If he went to the first round, I could totally see it, and it gives you a little game day flexibility because we saw what he was able to do last year for Ohio State in that national title run.
Gentlemen, incredible insight as always. Feels like we're just getting started. 38 more days until the 2025 NFL draft, but our mock draft 5.0 in the books as you take a look, as we recap picks 25 through 32. Biggest, most notable with the LA Rams taking Jaxson Dart, quarterback, out of Ole Miss after just bringing back Matthew Stafford. Mike Renner and Ryan Wilson are guys who just live, breathe, eat, and sleep mock drafts